Welcome to the Book of Job. So I decided to have this class online, and as you remember, we are looking at Job chapter 3, and I'm going to walk you a little bit through the chapter and give you some pointers. Feel free to pause this video and at certain points, do your own research on this particular issue, especially if you don't understand. But I'm going to do first just a 20-minute clip, 25-minute clip. Please take a look at it and go through the work yourself. So I'm going to read right now. This is verse 1 in Job chapter 3. And notice how it's read. It's like this. Acharei chen patach Yov et pihu vayekalel et yomo. So this is the first verb. This is the first verse. It's fairly easy to translate. There's no surprises here. Acharei chen is an expression and simply means after this, or something like after this. And then we have Yov, which is the name, of course, of the main character in the book. And we have the verb. In Hebrew, it is disputed if the subject goes first or the verb goes first. In my opinion, Hebrew is a subject first, verb second language, like many languages. The reason we have the switch here is because of this particular expression, acharei chen, because of this basically temporal marker. After this, and because of this temporal marker, the order of the words is switched. So you have the verb first, and then you have the subject. But notice the verb is very easy, looks just like a cal perfect third masculine singular, and that is exactly what it is. It's from the verb patach, is to open. So it's a very simple phrase to translate. After this, Job opened. Here, of course, we have the direct object following, and we have pihu, pihu. Now I put in red here P, because this is a word again you should familiarize yourself with. I know there are people at different levels here, but P it comes from the word pe, which means mouth, and when it has the pronominal suffix, notice hu. So again, please review your paradigms. Hu is the third masculine singular suffix, which sometimes is just an O, but it can also be hu. So after this, Job opened, and this is the object, his mouth. He opened his mouth. A very simple phrase. After this, Job opened his mouth. Now let's continue. Vayekalel et yomo. So here again, it's very simple, but I want to review it for you, and people who are more advanced, please excuse me. But it's good to review the Hebrew here. It's simply a vav consecutive. This tells us it's a vav consecutive. That automatically tells me I translated past. It tells me translated past first. Second, it tells me it must have a prefix, which it does. It's a yod. And we know that it's translated, it's an imperfect. So usually this is parsed like this: vav consecutive, or imperfect, you can say first, plus vav consecutive, and then you pay person, gender, and number. And because it starts with the yod and has no other ending, it's most likely a third masculine singular, which is, of course, which makes sense because again we're talking about Yov, we're talking about he. So it's third masculine singular. Now, another important feature that you should be able to identify at this level is this lamed with the dagesh in it. This is a dagesh forte, which doubles the lamed, which means that we are dealing most likely with the PL, and that's exactly what you will find in your lexicon. Notice, of course, the shva also tells us this is a PL. The reason we do not have the doubling here, which we expect a doubling here, is because there's a shva under the yod. And there are some consonants who, when they have a shva under, they do not double. So vayekalel, it's simply a PL, and this time is the verb to curse. If you remember, in the first two chapters, there are a few times where they use the verb to curse, but actually uses the verb barach, to bless.
but it's translated, it's used euphemistically. But here actually for the first time it's used the verb to curse, but notice that the one cursed is not God. The one cursed is not God. Everybody, the whole audience is expecting to see what is Job going to do in this situation. And finally, after a time, after his friends come, finally he opens his mouth and he curses. And you're probably expecting to see, whoa, what is he cursing? But of course, instead of cursing God, he curses, notice here, the direct object, he curses his day. And again, I put here for you the suffix. Notice the suffix, the more usual that we're used to, o, third masculine singular. He cursed yom, his day. He cursed his day. So please notice the third masculine suffix o and the third masculine suffix hu. So it could appear like this or like this, depending on the word and depending on sometimes even on the time. This is the more archaic form actually. The who is the more archaic. Who later is reduced to o. But of course you can have both of them appear at the same time in the same verse. So after this, Job opened his mouth and he cursed. But again, he doesn't curse God. He just cursed his day. And his day, we will see from the context, referred to the day of his birth. He cursed the day of his birth. So again, we can have a little bit of an idea about his anguish and his difficult situation in which he is right now. And he continues in verse 2 and just uses this very common expression which we've seen before. It says, Vayan yo vayomar. So simply just go back and review this if you don't know. Again, two vav consecutives. Job answered literally and said, or we can just translate, and Job replied. Job basically said. And now we're going to move to the next verse. But notice, this is typical translation. After this, Job opened his mouth, cursed the day of his birth, and Job said, this is the ESV translation. Now this is an interesting verse, and I just want to give you the Hebrew right now. So this is really where the poem starts. That was just the introduction. As I mentioned last time, this is like a poem. This is like a place where Job really is a lament. And it's a very, very sad lament. So let's look at the lament now, which starts right here. So I'm going to read for you in Hebrew. Feel free to repeat. And we're going to analyze this verse. So notice what it says. Yovad yom ivaled bo v'halayla amar hora gaver. So I said hora because notice a little bit of an accent here, a little bit of a pause here. Hora gaver. But here I put for you in red, I tried to put for you in red the verbal roots so you understand better. So notice here, yovad yom, yovad yom. So here, again, most of you will recognize that we have to do with the verb avad, and with the yod in front, it is an imperfect. And if you look it up in the dictionary, the verb avad means to perish, or in a certain binyanim, it means to destroy, but here is to perish, because as we shall see, this is a kal. It's a kal imperfect. And the exact same verb avad, if you do a little bit of research on this, it's actually quite frequent in the Bible, so I don't recommend that you look at all the occurrences. But for those of you who took Psalms with me, you might remember this verb appears both in Psalm 1 and Psalm 2, right? It says that the way of the wicked shall perish, uses avad. This is how Psalm 1 ends. And also you find it in Psalm 2, where it says, where God tells the kings, bow down and kiss the Son, lest you perish in the way. So to perish is not something that you want to happen to you. But here now the curse starts like this, Yovad Yom. And please notice here, we do not translate he will or it will perish the day. We don't translate it will. Again, normally, an imperfect we would translate with the future or a present. But here, this is an important point to make. Notice here we have an imperfect without a vav, any type of vav, and it's at the very beginning of a sentence. When you have an imperfect, at the very beginning of a line without a vav, that's a very strong indicator that we have to do with the Joseph. So we don't translate he will perish, but we translate let it perish. More specifically, let the day perish. Let the day perish. And you will notice again, almost every translation catches this usage of the imperfect as a Joseph, as a volitional, expresses a wish. Let it perish, yom, let the day perish. And then it continues, ivaled bo, ivaled bo. And here again, this is a little bit difficult to understand and a little bit surprising, because most of us expect it here to be a perfect, but probably again, most of you noticed that because we have these three consonants and we have an aleph in front, it's actually an imperfect. And here again, I just want to give you a strong indicator for those of you who again are a little bit less knowledgeable about Hebrew. When you see the first consonant with the vav, this is a vav with the dagesh, and this is a dagesh forte again. It has to be a dagesh forte because it's not a begat kafat, so that means it doubles it. When you see a dagesh forte in the first consonant and a patach, this is most likely a nifal. And indeed, this is a nifal imperfect, and because it's aleph here, first common singular. Now, normally we would translate, let the day perish, I will be born, in which I will be born. I will be born, bo, in it. I will be born in it. But as you notice, most translators translate, let the day perish on which I was born. I was born. So notice, this is a very interesting thing, and it seems to me to indicate again that this phrase, it's actually a little bit older because it's a clear usage of the imperfect with the past tense, like a preterite, what we call a preterite. So let the day perish in which is assumed. Notice in a normal phrase in Hebrew we would have a share or a share, in which I was born in it. But here being poetry, in poetry you rarely have a share. It's kind of assumed. Poetry, don't forget, it's characterized by brevity, by terseness. So in poetry, you shorten things. Many times you drop your definite articles, you drop your relative pronouns like a share. You rarely find a share in poetry. So let the day perish, I was born in it. And we supply, let the day perish in which I was born. But again, notice the usage of this as a past tense. Here again, it's sometimes you might want to pause this, and if you have a good computer, try to search and see where you find this expression. And again, I'm just going to give you a few examples here. If you go, for example, again in Job later, we find the same expression, this time in third person. So for example, it says in Job, I think it is Job 11:12. It says here, Va'ish navuv, so basically a stupid man, ilavev. Lavav is heart, and it is a verb, will get understanding. When irpera is just an expression, when a wild donkey, Adam Yivaled, is born, again, is born a man. But here notice it's not a past tense. It's more of a present. Or when a wild donkey will be born to a man, we can translate. It's a little bit more normal than we expect for an imperfect. Now another example we have of this, again, it's a nifal. Notice a nifal, but here is with vav consecutive, and this is of course something that we're more familiar with, and it's indeed translated with the past tense when we say va'ivaled le'aharon nadav, et nadav. So to Aaron was born. So notice past tense, nadav. So it's a usage of Yivaled. We notice it in other places. So it's good to familiarize yourself. But again, coming back to this, let the day perish, let Yom perish. I was born in it, in which I was born. So basically my birthday, his birthday, day of birth. V'halayla, and the night, Amar, very simple, You should be able to parse this. I will leave it. And the day, again, which said, again, there's no share, hora gaver. Hora gaver. And here again, it's a little bit of a difficult construction, but the verb is actually hara. It means to conceive, and here is like a pual perfect. But here, notice the parallelism. It's a perfect and an imperfect. Again, most likely, we're dealing here not with the normal imperfect, but with the short imperfect, which is the preterite. So, and that's why we find in poetry. In poetry, many times you find imperfect in parallel with the perfect, and with the same translation as a past tense. So this almost never happens in prose, in a normal narrative. But it happens in poetry a lot, especially in the book of Job. So let the day perish I was born in, and the night which said, a man was conceived. A man was conceived, gavar, gaver. Gaver is not your normal word for man. You expect ish or adam. This implies, and here again it's productive maybe if you want to do a word search on gaver. But basically the word is actually gever. But please notice the reason we have gaver instead of gever is because we have this pause at the end of the word. There's always a pause at the end of the word, and this changes a little bit the word. So this actually, you're not going to find it in the dictionary as gaver. You're going to find it as gever. It's a word that refers to a man, not a boy. Some translate boy. No, it's a man. So you know, you might want to think and wonder, why is it saying man and not a boy? What is the point that it's trying to make? Something to think about. But let's move on to the next verse. And if we move to the next verse, we move now to verse 4. And now notice what it says here. Hayom hahu, I'm going to read again the verse. Hayom hahu yehi choshech al idrshehu Eloah mima'al v'al tofa alav nehara. Al tofa alav nehara. So you know, again, going back just a few words at a time. Hayom hahu, hayom hahu. Because these two words appear next to each other and they both have a definite article, they're both masculine, yom and hu, and they're both singular, so there's agreement in all three categories. We have to take them together. So we're going to read that day, hayom hahu, that day. We're not going to read the day is, or that is the day. That is the day. Of course, the order would also be changed. The reason we're taking it together is because this is a attributive use of who. And we're taking it together and we read together that day, Hayom Hahu. And now it's telling us about that day, Yehi Choshech. Yehi Choshech. Yehi is, of course, a day, an expression that hopefully we're familiar from a beginning Hebrew. Yehi is, of course, again, a kal, imperfect, third masculine singular from haya. But notice here, it's the short form, because the long form would be yod, hey. It would be ichyech. And I don't have my pen to write it for here. It would be, actually, let me try to draw it for you here. So if it were, it would be like this, ichya. I'm just gonna put it for you here. It would be like this. Ichya. This is the kal, imperfect, third masculine singular. And this is the same thing, but this is what is called the apocopated form, or the short form. So notice it's the difference between ichye and yehi. They're both kal imperfect third masculine singular, but this is a joseph, and in this case, you can tell the difference between ichye and yehi. There's a difference in form. This is shorter, right? The hey is lacking. Hey is missing. And now I know for sure that this is joseph. I'm not going to translate I'm not going to translate it that day will be darkness. No, I will go to translate that day let it be. And again, most of you, of course, remember Genesis 1:3, for example, and the rest of the verses in Genesis when it says, "Let there be light," Yehi or Vayehi or. So this is the short form. This is a distinction. Unfortunately, what we see here in Yovad, there's no distinction here. Yovad, the Joseph form and the non-Joseph form looks the same. So we cannot tell from the form, from the morphology, which is if it's a Joseph or if it's a normal imperfect, we cannot tell from the form in this case, but we can tell, like I mentioned, from the position. It's at the beginning of the sentence and there's no vav in front of it. Now here, it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the sentence because we can tell even in the middle of the sentence if you want, because the form is different. So that's what we have. That day, let it be darkness. And then again, this is another indicator that we are in a volitional clause because we're using al, not lo, not lo. Al is also a strong indicator that we're in a volitional clause. So let it not, again, let it not, darash is to seek, let it not seek it, God, Eloah, the word for God, used many times in Job. So notice please that while we saw a few times Yahweh, we saw Yahweh a few times and we will see it a few times in Job, much more often it's using the more generic Eloah. So let it not seek it who? God. God from above. Mimal. God from above. Let God from above, we could say, not seek it that day. So let it be darkness. So, and again, if we continue, al tofa alav nehara. Again, look it up in a dictionary, but this is again from the verb yafa. So here, of course, be careful that sometimes when the verb seems to start with a vav, it's never vav. It's always yod. So, yod in certain conjugations becomes a vav. So here, don't be fooled. Do not look in the dictionary, in the lexicon under. Do not look under under vav, but look under yod. Again, if you look in your lexicon, take some time at home and look in the lexicon. You will notice that it's almost no words with vav in the Hebrew language. There's very, very few words, and almost no verb. So when you see a vav here, it's most likely because it's a yod in the instead of it. So al tofa, again an imperfect, but again just if let it not shine upon it, and again it's a light, may light not shine upon it. So again, notice here the translation let or may God above, or let God above not seek it, and let not light shine upon it. So again, notice if you think about it, what is happening here, Job is almost taking the role of an anti-God. Why God said, let there be light, notice Job, instead of saying, let there be light, he says, instead of saying, Yehi or means, let there be light, Job now says, let there be darkness. Sure, he doesn't say, let there be darkness over the whole world, but he says, let there be darkness. Basically over that day may not be sought from God, and may there not be light in it. So he's looking back, and he wishes basically that he was not born, as we shall continue to see. So now I'm not sure how to delete this ink replay. Let me see if that works. No. So I'm trying to just delete some of these things. I'm not sure if it works, but I'm trying to get rid of this. So let me see just a second. Oh, okay, I have the eraser here. Okay, so I'm gonna erase these things. I'll try to erase these things. because I want to move to the next verse and you cannot see it very well. So let's see the eraser. Okay. So hello. Eraser doesn't seem to work, but anyway. So we are about 25 minutes here. So this is a lecture. This counts as a lecture. So I will stop here and I will record another lecture and I will try to erase the screen. I will try to record another lecture and look at the next verses. And then when we meet together, we will discuss a little bit the theology behind it. But right now I was just focusing on the Hebrew itself. So I will stop right here and I will start another recording starting in this verse, the following verse, after I erase the screen. Okay, thank you very much.